have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
To Gay USA, I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Chris Cooper, filling in for Ann Northrup.
Welcome, Chris. And Chris is fresh from the March on Washington for Voting Rights that took place this weekend, which really highlighted the peril our democracy in. We have to escalate the noise we're making, as Larry Kramer says in the introduction. And of course, this was also the week when the U.S. Supreme Court let an abortion ban go into effect in Texas. Folks, Roe v. Wade has effectively been overturned.
There's a big win for trans student activist Gavin Grimm, but a setback for trans students elsewhere in Virginia and in Florida.
Right. Students at a Colorado Christian school walked out in support of a coach who was fired for being gay.
And California's vote on the Gavin Newsom recall comes down to the wire. And LGBTQ rights and a lot more are on the line if he is recalled.
The supporters of Stonewall participant Marsha P. Johnson don't wait for permission to honor her with a bust in Christopher Park in the Stonewall National Monument. I'm getting a little feedback here somewhere from somewhere. I don't know where it's coming from.
We've lost a pioneering lesbian deaf activist, Barbara Kannapell, who stood up for Black and LGBTQ deaf brothers and sisters as well.
Medals for LGBTQ athletes continue to be awarded at the Paralympics in Tokyo.
And in Bangladesh, 6 people were sentenced to death in the assassination of 2 gay activists.
Trans actor Alexandra Billings takes on the transphobia of producer Cameron Mackintosh.
Dancing with the Stars will have its first same-sex couple.
And you're going to review, Chris, the reboot of Candyman, starring out actor Coleman Domingo. And if our control room can do something about the feedback that I'm hearing when I speak, I don't know what's going on there, but I hope it can be fixed. All right, Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, I was kind of on the fence about going down to Washington for the March On for DC, statehood, and voting rights, principally because of the Delta variant and its spread, and then Texas happened. And the 3 Democrats who had been out of state and therefore preventing them from having their quorum in passing the draconian voting bill they wanted to push through, they actually came home. And so the Texas legislature had its quorum, and it was inevitable that they were going to pass this draconian voting rights change, this voter suppression bill that was going to target the voting rights of Black people in Texas. And that, I was just so pissed off. I'm like, okay, it's not a question anymore. I'm going to Washington.
Right.
So I went down to be there. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
What did you tell the crowd?
I told the crowd they needed to get angry. And everybody at home listening to this needs to get angry. Think of it this way. Black people gave Joe Biden the presidency by turning out in Milwaukee, by turning out in Philadelphia, by turning out in Detroit, by turning out in all the urban centers in swing states. Black people gave the Democrats the Senate by turning out in Georgia and giving them 2 senators to give them the majority. And yet, so Democrats control, right now, Democrats have total control. They have the ability to pass the Voting Rights Protection Act and pass the John Lewis Act. They have the power to do that because they control the presidency, they control the House of Representatives, and they control the Senate, all 3. And yet, when the fundamental rights of Black people to so much as vote, of people who have been suppressed through the years for so many decades, in so many ways, the Democrats can't get it done. They have the power to do it, and somehow some little filibuster rule of the Senate is more important than us actually protecting the voting rights of the constituency that has turned out for the Democrats year after year, election cycle after election cycle. And that is a reason, whether you're black or not, but certainly, for me as a black person, that makes me furious.
Well, if we don't solve this problem, it's really the end of, look, we're not much of a democracy as it is.
Well, exactly. And that's another reason why DC statehood is an important piece of this, because, you look at the fact that California, with 40 million people, a diverse state, gets 2 senators, while Wyoming, which is all white and has 400,000 people, also gets 2 senators. It's ridiculously skewed away from urban people, away from diverse populations in the Senate. It's not democratic in the slightest. Having DC become a state doesn't fix that, but it moves it slightly in the right direction.
Now, we're talking about the John Lewis Voting Advancement Act, restoring pre-clearance when you change how you do voting. The House passed it 219 to 212 along party lines. And H.R. 1, which is the For the People Act, that would end partisan gerrymandering, establish national standards for voter registration, and blunt those voter purges. And it also mandates offering mail-in ballots. But that's been blocked by the Jim Crow filibuster in the Senate, as has D.C. statehood, which was also passed by the House. And also Representative Mondaire Jones called for the expansion of the Supreme Court. And look what the Supreme Court did this week. Without issuing an opinion, they have let stand an unconstitutional law under Roe v. Wade, which is the precedent, to let Texas ban abortion effectively.
Yeah, no, the developments in Texas are the reason to be concerned. And I know you were talking, Andy, about the commission that Biden had formed to look at the Supreme Court and how it might be fixed. Let's be honest. Biden formed a commission so that he could shunt it off and backburner it and not talk about it and not deal with it because he doesn't want to expand the Supreme Court. So we've got to make him grow a spine. That is our job. So take your anger and express it. Express it to Biden saying, hey, you know what? Look what happened in Texas with abortion rights, with choice rights. Let's not use their terminology. Look what's happened in Texas. That's why we need to expand the Supreme Court. If you live in New York and you're hearing my voice and you haven't written to Chuck Schumer, who is our senator, so the majority leader is the senator from New York. So you determine whether or not he still has a job. Take your anger and write that letter to Schumer. Be polite, but be firm and say, Schumer, it is your job to wrangle those Democratic senators, filibuster or no, to make sure that the voting rights bills pass and that DC statehood comes into fruition.
But you've raised all the fundamental problems with our democracy, and that it's not much of a democracy, and that we don't have one person, one vote in this country. We don't even directly elect the president of the United States, for God's sakes. We have this ridiculous Senate, which was, put there to preserve slavery, for God's sakes. I mean, these are not good systems. We cannot continue to live under systems like this. So it's going to take more than anger. It's going to take really a second revolution.
Andy, I'm not arguing with your analysis of the state we find ourselves in. I'm only arguing with your proposed solution, because if you think that a revolution is going to happen anytime soon, I think you're going to be waiting for.
I'm not talking about armed revolution.
No, I know that. But what I'm saying is
about the fact that we cannot go on like this.
Yeah, but you're talking about constitutional amendments, and that's not going to happen.
I'm talking about a totally new constitution.
Well, right, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. But there are things we can use our anger for to make change now.
Well, a small ray of light, Justice Breyer finally is saying he doesn't want to die on the bench, but he gave an interview about it. But that would still leave the court with a 6-3 right-wing majority.
Well, at least it would mean it won't become 7-2, and the clock is running on this, because once we lose the Senate, if we lose the Senate, then we're back to square one, where we can't get somebody in because the Republicans will refuse to block him. And that's one of the most frustrating things in all of this, is that the Republicans have been playing hardball for years. And yet the Democrats are still sitting on the sidelines going, oh, but we want to strive for bipartisanship. I mean, if I hear that word one more time, I'm going to scream bloody murder. Because, you know, you hear it from Joe Manchin, oh, I want to craft bipartisan solutions. There is no bipartisan solution to a partisan attack on voting rights, which is what this is. It's like saying, oh, I don't want to cure cancer until cancer agrees that it's okay.
Well,
it makes no sense.
We could talk about all the corporate Democrats who line up with Republicans on many things, Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, these people, and others who are less who are staying on the sidelines and letting Manchin and Sinema take the heat on this thing. Anyway, we have a lot of other news to get to, but thank you for being there in Washington. And also you were on the Spike Lee series that's running on HBO. Right now.
I'm part of it's in four parts, and I'm in the first part.
Great. So check that out. What was it like talking to Mr. Lee?
It was fun. Yeah, Spike's a trip. And he puts you at ease. And, you know, he's actually always sort of a part of the conversation, of the dialogue, as you can see. There was one point where I said something and he just burst into this laugh, which was exactly what my father would have done if he had heard what I said. So it was fun to do.
I'm just looking for the name of it is New York Epicenters,
NYC Epicenters. Yeah, NYC Epicenters.
So it's the pandemic, it's the Black Lives Matter movement, it's 9/11, and it's January 6th, which took place in D.C., where you went.
No one will fault Spike for having a limited vision.
Speaking of D.C., the Washington Blade is suing the U.S. State Department for Rick Grenell's emails. He's the out-gay Trump ambassador to Germany who announced a worldwide campaign to end sodomy laws around the world in the 69 places that still have them. So the Blade wants to know, what happened with this? Who did you talk to? What did they say? And the State Department is resisting, so the Blade went to court to get it. And then, of course, Afghanistan was the other big story of the week. We're not ignoring it. I mean, there are more calls to admit LGBTQ refugees from there.
There was a coalition of over 60 representatives who sent a letter to the administration asking for more to have LGBTQ refugees prioritized into, I think it's called Priority 2 or something like that, which is...
Right. They want them in under the U.S. Refugees Admission Program, that they should be admitted as well.
They want them admitted on the same basis as those who worked with the U.S. government while we were still in Afghanistan.
Okay. Let's go to Virginia, where there was a big win for trans student Gavin Grimm, who won his endless court case versus the Gloucester County School Board about access to restrooms consistent with his gender identity. The ACLU announced that the school board is on the hook for $1.3 million in legal fees and will pay up. So my question for the school board there is, $1.3 million to oppress trans people, was it worth it?
And it took over 6 years. When you said endless, it was 6 years for this to happen. And in fact, Gavin Grimm's lawyer said it should not have taken 6 years or of expensive litigation to get to this point.
Now, Gavin is an activist, and he stood up for trans students in Newport News, Virginia this week. And we're going to hear Gavin Grimm speak because we have a news report from there.
Now, with some expert insight on a topic going through local school systems the past couple of weeks.
Transgender rights have taken center stage. Last night, Newport News reversed its decision on the state's non-discrimination policy. Gavin Grimm, a former Gloucester High School student at the forefront of transgender rights in Virginia, was there to speak. He's talking to 10 on Your Side's Jason Marks now about the issue and debate.
Last night, Gloucester's Gavin Grimm sat in Newport News and listened to speakers like this.
It forces people to adjust their life and partake of things that they neither want nor truly believe in.
I just had to listen to this garbage and hatefulness.
It brought him back to the days when he was 15 years old and transitioning into a male. He was ostracized.
Last night was stressful, and it was a bit upsetting to have to be there.
The Newport News School Board ultimately voted to adopt policies directed by the state to protect transgender students. The same can't be said for the Chesapeake School Board, who has chosen not to.
That is a devastating, disgusting thing to have to reckon with in high school, in middle school, in elementary school. It doesn't matter. It is just absolutely despicable that the Chesapeake schools have put this on their students.
Grimm took his fight all the way to the Supreme Court and won. A court ruled yesterday that Gloucester will pay Grimm $1.3 million in legal fees. He says if school officials need any guidance, all they have to do is look to the courts.
We have already fought this court case. If Chesapeake was worried about political reasons, they could have just pointed the finger at my case and said, hey, sorry, we have to do it because, the court says so.
The General Assembly voted to have school systems protect the rights of transgender students. Grimm says the guidelines should have been more specific.
I think they could have done a lot better in outlining what the consequences are if you refuse to follow the policy.
Grimm said though his personal fight is over, he's not done fighting for the rights of others.
It's very sad because it just shows the commitment that these people have to making vulnerable children miserable.
Jason Marks, 10 on your side.
Well, elsewhere in Virginia, though, the state Supreme Court sided with a phys ed teacher who claimed a religious right to misgender trans students in Loudoun County Public Schools. They had suspended him from speaking at school board meetings, and the court ruled he had to be reinstated while his lawsuit proceeds. He's represented by Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a right-wing religious legal group. I hope the students use their First Amendment rights to tell Cross what they think of his bigotry.
The phys ed instructor's name is Tanner Cross, as you mentioned. The thing is, and you and I were discussing this, Andy, I don't agree with the fact that he was banned from speaking at the school board. It's one thing to control the speech that goes on in the classroom, because you have to in various regards. But at a school board meeting, I always try to flip things around in my head. And, what if there was a ban on transgender people using the bathroom of their sex, and that they had to use the one of their birth gender? And, a school teacher went to the school board meeting and wanted to protest against that, wanted to protest for the students to be able to use their correct bathroom. And the school board said, no, you are banned from speaking at the school board meeting on that.
But in this case, it also means that he can go on misgendering students.
Right. So that's why you've got to parse it. There's the two aspects of it. Though, is there any accusation that he actually did that to students?
He's suing for the right. That's what his lawsuit says.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. You've got to separate the speaking at the school board meeting to the speech in the classroom.
We will follow the case. Now, last week we told you about a coach at a Christian school in Colorado who was fired because he wouldn't renounce his homosexuality. This was Inoke Tonga. He was removed, and his removal followed that of another teacher, Lauren Benner, a lesbian lacrosse coach, in 2019. So this week, 30 students at the school did a walkout, and we have a video report on that, protesting it.
A show of support for a high school volleyball coach who says his sexual orientation cost him his job.
Air Tracker 7 flew over Valor Christian High School today, where students walked out in support of Inoke Tonga. Denver 7 was the first to bring you Tonga's story on Sunday. He tells us he was forced to resign because he's gay.
And as Denver 7's Sloan Dickey found out, he's not the first Valor coach to experience this.
It was the best job she ever had.
It was honestly the best. It was literally my most favorite coaching job I've ever had.
In 2019, Lauren Benner became Coach of the Year at Valor Christian High School.
We were conference champions.
Less than a year later, she stepped down. A post on the school's website says little, only wishing her the best in her future endeavors.
It was gut-wrenching.
But in reality,
it honestly shook me to my core.
She says she was asked to resign because of her sexuality.
Just was completely degrading to my professional achievements, to who I was as a person.
A striking similarity to the story we shared on Sunday about Enoke Tonga.
They said I had two options. The first option was to denounce that I was gay.
He too was pushed out of Valor Christian for being gay.
Because I felt like I was being talked down to and belittled.
They both worked in athletics. Benner, a lacrosse coach, Tonga, a volleyball coach. Both decided to resign after being told that being gay did not align with the school's values.
It's not you're fired, it's you're no longer in alignment.
Benner stayed silent until this week.
I've cried many, many tears.
Compelled, she shared her story on Instagram.
I felt like if I didn't, that I would be, just not supporting him, not supporting students who I've now read messages.
Denver 7 reached out to Valor Christian for comment, but did not hear back. So we contacted a lawyer with Americans United for the Separation of Church and State.
It is likely not legal, and I would say it's not ethical.
He says religious protections for discriminating against sexual orientation only go so far.
Religious freedom is meant to be a shield. It is not meant to be a sword. It is not an excuse to discriminate.
Looking back now, Benner says she would never have accepted a job at a school that discriminated against sexual orientation.
I wouldn't go down that road just because of where it is, where the line is drawn and where our beliefs stand.
She says at the very least, she wants this to be a lesson for students.
Education, that for the people who, put me in that position, that they would feel led to educate themselves on what the other side is.
An opportunity to lead the way for athletes.
And CHASA told us in a statement, quote, the association doesn't condone unlawful discrimination in any form. They recommend anyone with a complaint against a school to contact the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. Reporting live in downtown Denver, Sloan Dickey, Denver 7.
So glad to see the students protesting. Some of the students said, so when you fire this person, you're essentially saying to those of us who are LGBT that we're a danger to somebody. Cole Watson, a gay alumnus, said that of the school, said in 2018, a teacher in one of his classes led a discussion about what part of hell he would end up in because of his choices. He's a gay guy.
Well, and Andy, related to all of this is the fact that 20 Republican-controlled states have banded together in a coalition to sue the Biden administration to try to make discrimination against trans people legal, because Biden has said that he's going to protect the rights of transgender students to get an education free from discrimination.
Well, Biden is saying if you don't treat trans students equally, you're endangering your funding from the Federal Department of Education.
Right.
They're saying that the DOE has guidance is unauthorized, and that it's different from the Bostock decision, which covered employment. The Supreme Court said can't discriminate against trans people in employment. It didn't say, and of course this is the way they like to put it, it didn't cover locker rooms, showers, and restrooms.
Right, and the 19 states that have joined Tennessee, which is the leader of this coalition, are Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, and West Virginia, the usual suspects.
Which is why I say we need a divorce. Yeah. Revolution, divorce, we're coming into two different kinds of countries, really, who see these things completely differently and have two different sources of media. There's people who watch Fox and there's people who watch Gay USA.
Yeah, it really is two different realities at this point.
All right, the disturbing decision from the 11th Circuit. The full circuit vacated a 3-judge panel that had ruled in favor of a trans student, Andrew Adams, in Ponte Verde, Florida, about his right to use the men's room. So it's a bad sign. So all 12 judges are going to now hear the case, but that could lead to a split in circuits. You've got the Grimm case, you've got this case, and that could lead to a U.S. Supreme Court decision.
And the right wing is really they've been for several years now focusing on the bathroom bill angle, and they seem to be getting a foothold on that. Meanwhile, in North Carolina, this guy's a piece of work. A Republican lieutenant governor named Mark Robinson is looking to get everything LGBTQ out of the schools. This has been this guy's crusade for a long time. Here's something you need to know about him. He's a black Republican. That right there makes everything about him inherently suspect, in my humble opinion. So you can take that to the bank, but that's what he's trying to do. He wants to push. He had a whole commission to deliver a report that talked about, it was called the Indoctrination in North Carolina Public Education Report. And he concluded that 13 specific concepts should not be promoted in the schools. Guess which concepts these are? Ours.
An alarm for California. If you haven't figured it out already, if you don't vote no on recalling Gavin Newsom, you're likely to get Larry Elder, a right-wing radio talk show host far to the right of Donald Trump, as your governor, because that's the way the thing works in this. Now, they have exposed the fact that he pulled a gun on his ex-fiancée and is accused of several acts of domestic violence. He's also being investigated for not properly disclosing his finances. But he could win a plurality and become the next governor unless you vote no.
But what happened with the lawsuit? Wasn't there a lawsuit challenging that system, saying that?
I have not heard.
Okay, all right.
All right. How about that R. Kelly? R. Kelly is being prosecuted for racketeering, not for rape, even though he obviously raped a lot of young people. He is being prosecuted for racketeering for the coordination of this exploitation of all these people. And this week in his trial, a young man came forward to talk about the fact that R. Kelly abused him sexually. And, he met the guy at a McDonald's and said, I can help your music career. And the kid came over and Kelly faces 10 years in prison and similar charges in Illinois and Minnesota.
Meanwhile, in Washington state, a ban on conversion therapy withstood a challenge from the right wing. It's a ban on conversion therapy for minors from licensed therapists. And this guy, brought his challenge. His name is Brian Tingley. He's a therapist. And he challenged it on the basis of, was encroaching on his free speech and his religious liberty rights. But the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington washed their hands of that pretty quick and said, nope, you know what? This regulates actions and treatments. It does not regulate speech.
I want to talk about a great leader that we lost this week, Barbara Kannapell, 83 years old. She was a deaf activist who empowered people who are deaf, people with hearing impairments as well, giving them a sense of identity and helping legitimize American Sign Language, which she considered her native language. She died from complications from hip surgery and is survived by her wife, Mary Eileen Paul. She was the daughter of deaf parents and grew up in a supportive environment, but her grandmother, who was hearing, who did have her hearing, insisted on her attending an oral school where kids were not allowed to sign, introducing her to discrimination that deaf people suffer in our society. She got a PhD in sociolinguistics at Georgetown. She conducted workshops on power and oppression around the world. She was the founder of Deaf Pride in 1972 and its president until 1985. She sought to bring white and black deaf families together. She was sober for 50 years and helped establish an all-deaf AA group. She was a strong advocate for the LGBTQI deaf community. Like her parents, she attended Gallaudet, and had taught for 40 years there. She met Ms. Paul at a gay bar in 1971, and they married in 2013.
But you're leaving out the best part about how they met, Andy, because it was a gay bar, and I had never heard of this before. Gay bar where there were telephones at each table. So if you saw someone you wanted to speak to, you could call their table. Problem was, at Dr. Kannapell's table, everybody was deaf. So she's calling and calling, trying to reach Kannapell and tell her, I think you're cute. And they don't even know it. So finally she had to go over there and physically introduce herself. And she spent the next day, she ran to the library to download everything she could about deaf people so that she could make a play for Dr. Kannapell.
Now people just use Grindr in bars, and they can signal you with some lights flashing. All right, let's go to the Stonewall National Monument. Let's put up that picture of Marsha P. Johnson. A bust was erected in Christopher Park in the Stonewall National Monument at Stonewall Place to honor her on her 76th birthday. Now she died, I believe, in about 1991. It was a project of writer and activist Eli Ehrlich and sculptor Jesse Pallotta and other organizers. It's not a luck prize.
Yeah, I was going to say the key part, Andy, is that it's a guerrilla action. It's not. It wasn't the sanctioned government statute.
The trans community took matters into their own hands. The activists want the city to follow through on a permanent marker there. Now, this one is not meant to be permanent, but it may be there for a while. If you get down to the Stonewall and to the area, you'll be able to see it, and it's at least an indication that we need something permanent there. Maybe they can move it to the Stonewall Bar.
Well, and just to be clear, the city has committed to putting up a statue to Marsha P. Johnson there, as well as another activist. But because of COVID and various other delays, it just hasn't happened yet. So these activists went and did their own.
Well, the engravement on the monument to Marsha says, it's a quote from her, "History isn't something you look back at and say it was inevitable. It happens because people make decisions that are sometimes very impulsive and of the moment, but these moments are cumulative realities." Marsha P. Johnson. All right.
So, Andy, tell me about this Uplinger guy in Buffalo, because I have to admit I was not familiar with this story, the story of Bob Uplinger. So I was just reading about it today.
We talked about him last week, the fact that this marker was put up, but I left out some details, and I was reminded by people from the Buffalo community. Now, that guy in that picture is William Gardner, who represented Bob. He also was the guy who represented Onofre in getting rid of the sodomy law in 1980 in New York State. So he did that, and then he represented Bob. Once they got rid of the sodomy law, the police needed something to oppress us so they would get us on the solicitation laws. Bob fought that with William Gardner all the way to the Supreme Court. And this marker was put up by the Buffalo Niagara LGBTQ History Project. This guy Gardner routinely represented gay men in the 60s and in the 70s who were arrested, at public places or whatever. At the time, he had a wife and kids, and then he finally came out himself. And he got Uplinger reinstated in the Buffalo school system when they fired him for being out. Bob Uplinger went on to found the Gay and Lesbian Youth Group of New York. He died at 35 of AIDS.
Hopscotching the continent a little bit, if we go over to California, sort of the opposite, where in Buffalo they're erecting a great plaque. In Modesto, California, there was a straight pride rally. This is the third time they've had it there, and it degenerated into a fist fight and someone spraying bear spray and 2 arrests. So straight pride, probably not the best idea to hold a rally for it.
Last week, we told you Just for Fans had banned, then unbanned erotica on its site. This week, we learned that eBay recently banned the sale of sexually explicit material, and historians are alarmed that this could hurt efforts to preserve gay history, especially from the pre-Stonewall era.
Wow. In Utah, there was a wannabe politician who made some poorly chosen comments. Last weekend, and Andy told you about the newlywed lesbian couple, Crystal Michelle Turner and Kylan Carol Schulte, who were found brutally murdered, shot to death at a campsite in Moab, Utah. Well, since then, this right-winger, Natalie Klein, anti-gay conservative state board member, saw some a rainbow progressive pride flag at a Mormon school that was welcoming, and she said, "Oh, we've got to do something about that. We're time to make some phone calls. The world is too much with us," was the exact quote. And then this guy in Utah who wants to be a politician but has failed multiple times, his name is Gregory Smith, and he said, "Time to get the muskets out." Now, he says he's deleted that post to Twitter, and he says the meaning of that was, some Mormon leader said we need to take the muskets out to defend our faith, that it was a figure of speech. But it was a really poorly timed figure of speech, coming on the heels, as it was, of the gun death murders of Crystal Michelle Turner and Kylan Carol Schulte.
we are dedicated to nonviolence, and as Chris Cooper says, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be getting angry. We should be getting angry.
You got to know how to harness that anger.
Now, the other thing in Texas, of course, is they may pass their anti-trans bill in sports, and a coalition of 55 employers in Texas said, don't do this kind of stuff. We're never going to attract the kind of tech and positive, businesses we need in Texas if you do that. And so, but the Texas legislature is hell-bent on destruction this year.
Yeah, they are sort of determined to burnish their credentials with the most right-wing base of the Republican Party so that they can seek higher office in the Republican Party. And that's a problem, especially because Texas is not that red of a state anymore. It's a purple state. And yet they have these right-wing nightmares who are in charge.
Well, there is no Republican Party anymore. It's just a Trump fascist party. And I use the word advisedly because that's what it is. And that is what is being constructed. And I don't know how we're going to survive it in 2022 and in 2024.
Well, one bright spot, which comes from New Hampshire, which is a Republican state, generally, their Department of Motor Vehicles has removed barriers to people updating their gender markers. The New Hampshire state legislature in 2019 had passed a new law that allowed you on your government-issued ID to put in X instead of a male or a female. But what the Department of Motor Vehicles had done was to insist that you had to have a doctor's letter, some sort of medical documentation for you to be able to do that, even though that wasn't anywhere in the law. Well, they've sorted that out. That's no longer the case. The DMV is no longer asking for some sort of documentation, medical documentation, and you can just change it to an X if you want it.
They definitely are a different kind of Republican in New Hampshire, so I will give them credit for that. In Louisiana, another case of a black trans woman, Pooh Johnson, also known as Titanizer Mua, was shot to death in Shreveport on August 23rd. Authorities said they would investigate whether her gender identity played a role in the murder, but police initially misgendered her. Johnson worked as a makeup artist.
This was the 35th violent death of a gender non-conforming or trans person so far this year, and we are sadly nearing last year's record total of 44 such deaths.
In better news, there were at least 23 out LGBTQ athletes at the Paralympics. Shall we go over some of them?
Sure.
The champion equestrian, Sir Lee Pearson, 47 years old, a gay man, won his 12th gold medal in dressage since his debut in 2000, riding Breezer there. He sent a message of support to his lesbian and gay community. Love has to prevail, whatever shape or form. It was really very, very heartfelt. He's been out for decades. And then we have out British cyclist Crystal Lane Wright, who won a silver medal in the women's 3,000 meter pursuit, posting the best time of her career, narrowly beaten by Dame Sarah Story, who was also from Great Britain, who broke the world record by 4 seconds. Story has been a mentor to Lane Wright. And
also Lauren Rowles, a lesbian from Great Britain, with her male partner Lawrence Whiteley in the mixed double sculls for Great Britain, won a gold in that rowing competition. And she is there with her girlfriend, Jude Hamer, who's competing in wheelchair basketball and is heading, I think, into the finals against China.
And we have our first out trans or non-binary athlete to win a medal at the Paralympics, Robin Lambert.
Robin Bird? She's at the Paralympics?
Yes.
Robin Bird is at the Paralympics?
Robin Lambert, not Robin Bird. Lambert, 24. We love Robin Bird. Bronze in the women's 100 meters wheelchair sprint. Lambert uses they, them pronouns. Good on her. And finally, I have...
good on them.
They, them. Didn't I say that?
Yeah, you said good on her. You said good on them.
They, them. Thank you very much. Usually Ann corrects me. I appreciate it.
Today in the role of Ann Northrup.
And then Kate O'Brien of Canada Kate O'Brien was an Olympian in the last regular Olympics, if you want to put it that way, and had an accident and became a Paralympian, paracyclist, and won the silver in Tokyo in the women's 500 meters. And they're having Pride Day at the U.S. Open tennis tournament out there today. It's their first ever, although they've done Pride events. And after all, they named the whole tennis center for Billie Jean King, who was a lesbian activist and a fine tennis player. Okay.
Out in Flushing Meadow, where it's going to pour rain later today, so it's how prideful it actually is.
Boy.
Yeah.
All right. How about some international news?
Yeah, we've got probably the most grim news of all, which is, and I know you and I are both anti-death penalty, but when you read about this crime, it's just really, really horrifying. The 6 guys who killed the gay activists in Bangladesh, and I'm going to mutilate the name, please forgive me, Zulhaz Manan. They have been sentenced to death. Now, only 4 of them were in custody. 2 of them, including one of them who's a former general in the army, are still at large. But what these 6 men did was they posed as couriers to get into Zulhaz Manan's building. And in the boxes they were carrying, they had machetes, and they hacked Zulhaz Manan and his friend Mahbub Rabi Tanoy to death with those machetes. Just horrific. And it was part of a series of targeted attacks in Bangladesh against academics, against secular writers and activists who they felt were disrespecting Islam, just trying to create an atmosphere of fear all around.
They're from a group related to Al-Qaeda. I mean, these are
That's what the local stories are saying.
Al-Qaeda in the subcontinent, awful. But again, we're against the death penalty, but we're kind of amazed that we're getting justice for the assassination of gay activists.
Absolutely.
That doesn't happen in some parts of the world. Switzerland is going to have their referendum on marriage equality on September 26th. And in the polling, 69% polls say they will uphold the law that was passed by the parliament. Switzerland already has domestic partnerships.
It seems like Switzerland has been doing this forever, kind of like Mexico's been doing it incrementally forever.
Well, in Mexico, the Yucatan Mexican state voted to approve of marriage equality last week. It passed 20-5. And they banned conversion therapy while they were at it. Let's just get it over with and give the gays what they want.
Unfortunately, a little further south in Nicaragua, they are trying to shut down the country's oldest LGBTQ rights group, Fundación Xochiquetzal. The Interior Ministry has asked that the National Assembly annul the legal nonprofit status of Fundación Xochiquetzal and 14 other non-governmental organizations. And this is seen as part of a push by President Daniel Ortega and his wife, the vice president, to cement power and just basically turn their rule into a dictatorship.
His vice president's his wife.
Mm-hmm. Where have we seen that before? They tried to do that in Argentina with Eva.
Anyway, it's an anti-democratic campaign, similar to what U.S. Republicans are doing here. The U.S., Biden met with Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, today, and the LGBTQ Equality Caucus is urging him to raise LGBTQ rights in the Ukraine because there are a bunch of anti-gay bills pending there, like the Russian-style anti-gay propaganda law. It could go either way in the Ukraine. The cabinet has added sexual orientation and gender identity to the hate crimes law. But Pride celebrations there have been targets of violence.
Well, I don't have any more international.
Well, in Vietnam, Vice President Harris met with 2 LGBTQ activists during her trip to Hanoi, part of a roundtable of people from social advocacy groups, a trans activist, an LGBTQ activist, and Harris cited the fact that Vietnam has a 2017 trans rights law. So progress. The Dominican Republic celebrated Pride on Sunday, but they're worried about an anti-discrimination bill that does not cover sexual orientation and gender identity and so leaves them subject to discrimination.
And one of the problems in the Dominican Republic is that the church is so vehemently anti-gay there and holds a lot of sway.
Right. They were very hostile to our ambassador there, who was gay. In Australia, this is a horrible story. A 28-year-old father of 3 was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He viciously beat his 6-year-old son when he saw him sitting on the lap of another boy. He said, being gay is wrong, and if they were adults, I would have killed them. And then his wife tried to intervene and protect the whole family, and he tried to choke her, repeatedly hit them. He admitted to police, I am a piece of S. He has already spent a year in prison, but he could be out by Christmas on parole. But he was convicted.
Sounds like this guy needs some serious help.
AIDS news.
Toni Morrison, who's is it a producer on Good Morning America? He has come out about his HIV status and talked about how he's been HIV positive for 8 years, but he's been hiding it. And that kind of surprised me because I was sort of thinking, well, aren't we sort of at the point now with HIV where it's not stigmatized the way it was back in the early days?
Well, here's the thing, and we've talked about it before. Like Corey Johnson, the Speaker of the City Council, waited 9 years after diagnosis to come out about having HIV publicly. And because here's the thing, people don't want to be defined just by an illness. I mean, I will tell you, since everybody's so interested in what's going on with my eye, I have myasthenia gravis, and I'm taking medication, and it's helping the eye a little bit in the vision. But I mean, so we don't generally introduce ourselves by saying we have this or that disease. And so he didn't, but he felt terrible shame about it. That's the problem. And so he overcame that, and
well, he wrote a very personal essay about it, and you can read it at goodmorningamerica.com. I don't think it's fair to try to summarize it here, but you should go read it and see what you think of.
I will link to it in our email.
Excellent.
The Netherlands is phasing out a ban on blood donations from men who have sex with men. It will screen donors based on safe sex practices, not on the sex of their partners. The CEO of the Black AIDS Institute was let go on August 20th, prompting many in the HIV/AIDS community to sign a letter condemning the dismissal. This woman's name is Copeland, had recently been approved to Biden's Presidential Advisory Council on AIDS. And the J&J HIV vaccine, there are others being tried, has failed its first efficacy trial. It enrolled 2,600 women in Southern Africa at very high risk. It was launched in 2017. It only had a 25% effectiveness rate. You need at least 50 to be considered effective. A second study enrolling men who have sex with men and trans people in the Americas and Europe is continuing, and Pfizer is also conducting a trial. Entertainment news.
Well, today, people who stream a lot on the streaming platform Twitch are planning a boycott. I say today, we are recording this on September 1st. And it's got the hashtag a day off Twitch. And the reason is because there's been a lot of sort of rampant racist and anti-LGBTQ harassment on that Amazon-owned platform. So they're asking everybody to shut it off and take it down for a day, and to make a point that there needs to be some moderation of the platform.
Well, there's inclusion on Dancing with the Stars. Finally, in its 30th season, they're finally going to have its first same-sex couple. I can't believe it. Social media singing sensation JoJo Siwa, S-I-W-A, she's well known, and an unnamed female professional partner. JoJo is 18, identifies as gay and queer, and said the pairing signals to viewers that it's okay to be your true self. The show premieres on September 20th on ABC.
And Andy, I can't come on without talking about comic books at least a little, as a former Marvel Comics guy. And once a Marvel Comics guy, always a Marvel Comics guy. This is not Marvel. This is actually an independent comic, but it debuts a Latin Asian LGBTQ superhero called Luz. And she is a Dominican Chinese woman superhero. and it's in the 3rd issue of the comic book series La Borinqueña. So it's by Edgardo Miranda Rodriguez, and you might want to check it out.
All right. And why don't you, while you're at it, why don't you tell us about what you think of the reboot of Candyland? One of the stars is the out actor Coleman Domingo.
Candyman.
Candyman.
Yes, Candyman. So this was really interesting because I went in with not much in the way of expectations. A lot of you, or some of you may, especially if you're horror fans, may remember the original movie Candyman. I think in the 80s it was, or early 90s. And it was just this, it was set in a housing project, and it was this grim tale of how if you look in the mirror and you say the name Candyman 5 times, it summons this vengeful spirit of this guy who died unjustly in those projects, and it just kills and hacks and tears people apart. Well, what they've done is it's not really a reboot, it's a whole reimagining. They've taken that original story, but they've expanded it, they've built on it to make it relevant to what's happening in the social justice movement today. And it is a wonder because it is creepy and scary as hell, but now it's relevant. And they include, not only is there an out gay actor in it, which is Coleman Domingo, who I actually didn't know was out gay, but there's 2
on the show.
When was he on the show? Wow. Huh,
When he did a show here in New York. He's a stage actor as well.
Huh. Well, they've got 2 gay characters in the show, supporting characters, but they're treated with respect. They're integrated into the story, and it's just I saw it at a preview screening and was happy so much with it that I'm going back tomorrow to see it again. So that's my recommendation. So not many movies I'll sit through twice if it's not the original Star Wars or The Empire Strikes Back.
So big dust up. The big producer Cameron Mackintosh, who does a lot of the big musicals in London and New York, made some kind of a statement. Let me get it here. That putting a trans person into a woman's role is gimmick casting. And this.
He also said that. I think that if the material for the piece requires it and it's well done, that it will be popularly embraced. But there are, he was basically saying there are specific shows that trans people are only appropriate for.
So Alexandra Billings, who is a fierce transgender actor, a star of Transparent, a guest starred on Broadway as a gangster in The Nap. I thought she was wonderful. And made history playing Madame Morrible in Wicked on Broadway. So she's hitting back. She said, I am an actor. I am Mame. I am Madame Rose. I am Miss Hannigan. And I am Annie Oakley. And I am Fantine. I am an actor, Mr. Mackintosh, and not a gimmick. And just so we are clear, you don't have to make room for me. I take up my own space. And that was given to me by a power greater and far more powerful than you. More powerful than Cameron Mackintosh? Somebody say amen.
Oh, she put the smackdown on him hard. She also said, but I am these stories because I am part of the human fabric, and no one has the right to take any of this away from me. Not the police who arrested me, not the society who shunned me, and not you who labels me. We will create that space with or without your consent.
So Mackintosh is backpedaling. He is saying he was misinterpreted. He said, relative to Mary Poppins, which is one of his shows, I meant that as a producer, I would not disregard the author, P.L. Travers, very difficult woman who wrote the book, original intention for the character. Says he would cast trans actors, including in Mary Poppins, as long as they can perform the role as written. Well, that's fair, but I don't know why he said what he said before. I mean, I would, you can cast women in men's roles, men in women's roles, if they are playing the character properly.
I think he deserves a gold medal at the Olympics for the backstroke.
Well, there's still going to be a trans march on Broadway now. Monday, September 6th at noon, although I wrote to the publicist who sent me this and I said, so where is it? And what time? Well, it says noon, but where is it going to be? And anyway, it's called You Gotta Have a Gimmick, and they're going to have a concert as well. You Gotta Have a Gimmick. Gotta Have a Gimmick is the song from
A gypsy.
Gypsy.
Yes.
Well,
oh my God, I am gay. I knew that. The other thing is
the strippers song.
Yes, exactly. As a reminder to everyone, this is I think it's Friday. Yes, Friday, September 3rd, is the debut on Amazon Prime of the new film version of Cinderella. And of course, that stars Billy Porter in the role of the fairy godmother. So you might want to not miss it.
We ran that trailer a couple of weeks ago. So to get you primed for Billy Porter as the fairy godmother. Lance Bass is lobbying ABC, now that they're doing a same-sex partners on Dancing with the Stars, to do a gay version of The Bachelor. He himself hosted a dating series, Finding Prince Charming, on Logo in 2016. In 2019, MTV did Are You the One? With an all fluid cast. ABC is doing a Bachelor version, though, for older people next.
All right, well, since I am here in the role of Ann Northrop, I will simply add that I almost never watch reality TV, but I did watch a show called Playing It Straight, which had a whole bunch of contestants, and this gay guy had to pick which one he wanted to date. But what he didn't know was that they weren't all gay. Some of them were straight and some of them were gay. And so he had to sort of, at the very end, they told him, oh, the last two people you're picking from, one's gay and one's straight. And it was.
Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed the meltdown of his best friend, Audra or Andra, I think it was Audra. And when she found out that they'd been played like this, she just had this epic meltdown. So that was kind of fun to watch.
All right. We have a picture of this RuPaul's Drag Race star, Gigi Goode, Goode, 23, has come out as trans non-binary. Gigi was the runner-up on season 12. Started hormone therapy and facial gender-affirming surgery, as she's had. She said the pandemic and the HBO Max show Venimo, about a trans model in Spain, helped clarify her identity. So maybe television does have some power. We're down to our last minute, Chris. What a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you would think the last week of August would be slow, but I guess it was
the devil never sleeps. The devil never sleeps.
Exactly. Well, the devil may not sleep, but Ann Northrop may be sleeping right now, but she will be back next week in her usual role.
It's been great to have you, Chris, and glad to see you. Look, we have 40 more seconds. We did debate a little bit about revolution and all those kinds of things. What's next for you?
Writing a memoir, and hopefully it'll be somewhat illuminating about some of the things we've done in the last 50 years in our struggles.
If it's a bestseller, we hope you will still come on Gay USA to discuss it.
Always.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. And thank you all for watching. And go to our website, Gay USA TV, sign up for our email list, and we'll see you next week.